Development Finance Authority's Troy Subcommittee to order. Mr. Lapen, will you take the roll, please?
I will. Madam Chair, Robin Beltramini.
Here.
Paul Huff. Here. Michael Kidder. He's not. John Sharp. He's not. David Shields. He's not. Nicholas Vitale. Here. County Representative Irene Spanos.
Here.
And alternate Mayor Danny Slater. Here.
Thank you. The next order of business is the annual election of officers. We have a chairperson and a secretary that we choose. I would entertain a motion.
I would like to move that we appoint both current members on the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other nominations? All those in favor of re-electing myself as chairman and Mark Miller as secretary, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. 2015 meeting schedule. This meeting and then one the fourth Monday in October. And they will both be at 3:30. Does anyone have any objections to that before we put it on the table for anything?
Madam Chair, it was already voted upon in October.
That's what I
Just a
thought.
reminder.
Oh, all right.
It does say approval.
It does say
Oh,
approval.
it
That's one I was like, really?
does.
Yeah.
I know that. Just a
Okay.
regular 2015 meeting.
Oh, yeah, you're right, I'm looking at the minutes.
Okay, so we're done, we don't have to approve it, that's good. Okay, now we have approval of minutes from October 27th. I can't help you, I wasn't there.
Move approval.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. They are to be approved as written. If everyone concurs, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Does anyone have any old business? There was none proffered by staff, but seeing none, new business, budget, 2015-16 LDFA budget. Mr. Latham, do you have a presentation or just Mr. Miller?
Mr. Miller, will you do a brief overview?
I would like to note first off that we did lay out a revised budget, but there was just a minor correction in the introduction in that, identifying the number of members. I would like to take you to the last page of the budget, which is your last sheet. The best way to explain the budget is to go backwards. So, right on this page are the taxing jurisdictions which we do tax capture on, which creates our revenue. And then it lists all of the rates and the total rates. And that's what the Local Development Finance Authority captures to create their revenues. Any questions on that?
No. Can you just describe how it works real brief? You're looking at this page?
Yep, that page. Each taxing jurisdiction has a millage rate. And pursuant to state law and our approved development and TIF plan, we're allowed to capture the taxes paid but only from the taxable value above the base year. And the base year is when the plan's created, the total taxable value is X.
Right.
And
Any incremental?
Any increment goes on top of that. The one thing I will warn is that, and we'll see later in this budget, that you'll start to see a reduction because of the new personal property tax law.
Is that, yeah. I was gonna
That
ask
does
that
affect
question
us.
when we got there.
We'll see that in the revenues coming up.
Okay, and so we get to tax industrial real estate, commercial personal, and industrial personal.
Right, except, as you know, in school opt-out,
Right.
Industrial real and industrial personal are exempt from that. So that's the case where you don't do it. And then under the half of school opt 12, the personal property, both in the commercial and industrial class, are exempt from that.
Okay.
All right, so then we go backwards to the second page of the budget. And I'm going to look at the second half of the budget, the lower half, which is captured taxable value. So Mr. Vitale's question is, how do we capture it? Well, if you look at an industrial real property, and then you have real base taxable value, and that is $13 million and change. But you will notice for each fiscal year, 15, 16, 16, 17, and 17, 18, that's the same because that is the base. Then the real taxable value is listed under the next row, and it is in 15, 16, 13,261,600, and then it goes up slightly each year from there going out. And then the next row is industrial real captured value. So that's the amount of captured value. First fiscal year is 245,000 and change. The second is 457,000 and change. And then the third is 672,000 and change. Actually, that's a good story. You start to see the taxable value climbing. That's what you multiply times all of the millage rates.
Right, that's the
In-
incremental increase in the value.
Correct. In that industrial real property class. So then we go to the commercial personal property.
Can I ask another
Sure,
question before
sure.
we move on? So we're talking about 16, 17, 17, 18. These are estimates?
15, 16 is a good number, but the
Right.
other ones are estimates, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they
and
get
I,
updated as we go throughout time?
next year.
Yeah.
Next year, because
Okay.
I forgot to mention that we do a 3-year budget when we approve this, and we go for 3 fiscal years, and our fiscal year starts on July 1st and ends on June 30th.
Okay, so we're June 30, all right?
Yeah, yeah. I apologize for not mentioning that earlier. So the next grouping is the commercial personal property. There is their personal base taxable value, and that's 1.4 million and change, and that's the same every year because that's the base. Then the personal taxable value is 2.4 million and change, and then it goes up a little bit. And then the captured value in that class is 976,000 the first year, just over $1 million, and then it goes up a little bit more, over $1 million. And you can see there's a little steady rise in that.
What year was the base set?
The base was set when it was created.
2004.
Yeah.
It could have been on the 2003 year, but it was approved in 2004.
Okay.
The next category is industrial personal property, and then the personal base of taxable value, there is none. The taxable value is 7.1 million and change. The second year, you see a pretty big drop off. And the reason why there's no base is it's not real property, it's personal property. The second year, you really start to see the law related to personal property really have an effect because it goes to 5.7 million. The third fiscal year, 5.1 million and change. So you really see a reduction. And if you look at the last line, row going across total captured value, you see 8.4 million, 7.2 million, 6.8 million. So personal property, you do see that fall.
And
So
is that what's driving the big reduction in revenues from
Yes.
14 to 15?
yes, in fact,
Yes.
the next grouping actually will be the revenue. What
Okay.
we look at, if you go to tax revenues, industrial real revenues are 6,000 the first fiscal year, 12,000 and change, and then 18,000 and change. It grows. Commercial personal revenues, 23,000. It goes up slightly, 23,009, and then 24,000. So it's growing a little. But this is where we get hurt. Industrial personal revenues, 150,000 and change the first fiscal year, 120,000 and change the second fiscal year, 108,000 and change the final fiscal year. So then we can actually go up to the budget, the upper area, and under revenue, we look up on the top portion of the budget, here to revenue. And you follow across, and last fiscal year, our property tax revenue and personal property tax was 184,000 when we budgeted. And then if you look under the third column, which is 2015 budget, that's what was approved last year, 138,000 of revenues. If you go to the second column, back to the left, this is an opportunity to amend the budget. That's why we call it estimated, because we sometimes do amend it. But in this category, we're not going to amend it. Then we move to the fourth column, which is 2016 budget year, which is the first year of the three-year budget, $180,900,000. 2017, $157,100, and then the final fiscal year, $151,500. And then underneath that, you have a column of interest income, which is minor, and then we have the total revenues listed underneath that, which is just slightly above the property tax revenues.
So just a quick story, 2014, where our revenues were 185,000. We dropped to 140. We were budgeting the drop, so the budget was actually pretty close to actual. But what was that drop precipitated on?
The real estate market, the values still hadn't bottomed out.
Okay,
Because the way that we assess property, it actually is behind a little bit than
It
the actual
lags.
market.
yeah. So, okay, bottomed out in that year and then started to rise again to get us back up to 182. But now we're seeing the industrial personal revenues dropping off, which is causing the decline.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Right, thank you. Any more questions on revenue? So then we're going to to expenditures categories, and the first row is for automation alley operations, and we allocated in 2014, previous fiscal year, $60,000. We budgeted a year ago $57,000, and we're estimating a continuation of the $57,000. And then the first fiscal year of this budget, 2016, we're budgeting $61,200, and then $62,500, and then $63,700.
And what do those dollars get used for?
They go ahead, Richard.
Well, no, I was going to say, Ken could probably answer that better than all of us.
Yeah, it's part of our original agreement when we came to Troy, when negotiations were made. And basically, for us to bring it here, we needed operational funds, and it just wasn't gonna happen without it.
It's a funding source to keep automation out here. Okay, good.
And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a little bit more to that story in that when that enabled us to create a smart zone, but we had to do it jointly with Southfield because there just weren't other smart zones. The smart zones then allowed us to do a certified technology park, which enabled us then to capture school taxes.
Right.
And then we created a brand, the Automation Alley Smart Zone.
Right. Did we just create another smart zone with St. Clair too?
We're working on that. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Connecting
It's
the
coming,
dots.
it's coming.
Okay, so the next row is infrastructure, and we budgeted $122,500, but we're only estimating $106,000, and that was for the Big Beaver Road improvements, which have already occurred. They were installed in the later summer months of last year. And then we're budgeting in 2016, $72,000 and change, and we're projecting that we are working on a pedestrian crossover near the Automation Alley Park, kind of I don't want to say directly across from Altair, but it kind of is to the commercial on the north side of Big Beaver. But that, I will tell you that would not pay for that. It's going to cost approximately a little bit under $500,000, but we're in the process of doing preliminary design work on that, and we would have to get other grant funding and maybe private contributions to install that.
And that's an overhead walkway?
No, at grade,
At grade,
with
okay.
signalization and separation.
Okay.
And to just finish out, that was $72,000 the first year, $62,000 and change, and then $60,000. So it's dropping a little bit. The third line is tax tribunals and tax funds. If you notice, we had nothing budgeted in the budget that was approved last year, but we're going to amend the budget for $50,000. And what we found is the Oakland County Treasurer accidentally paid capture to the city twice for the Old Dominion properties. So we have to repay that in this budget. And we're not budgeting any monies out in the future
What year was the double payment made?
in this fiscal year.
Okay, so it's a wash. It's in revenue now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All in the same year.
Well, no. It was paid in this year, and we're gonna pay it out next year.
Okay, so it is,
So it came in as revenues, and now we're gonna, yes, it's a wash. It's a wash. Because
well,
it
it is
came in and
over
it has to
2
go out.
years. Where is it in the 16 budget? So
It
this
wouldn't
is,
have been in the budget because it was
oh,
unanticipated.
this is an
No.
expense, so we already received it, and
Yeah.
we're paying it back.
Had we amended the estimated budget to include that $50,000, it would have shown up there as a revenue.
It's confusing though that
Yeah, we
you
did.
don't see it on two different lines, if it's an in and an out.
Well, we might, wait till we get to fund balance,
Okay.
and you might not see the exact details. So, and then administrative services, we charge out $5,000 every year, and that's for myself, Glenn, and Lori, working on administering, well, yeah, we have another line item for Jay.
Good.
Marketing costs, originally it was $15,000 for the membership Automation Alley, and that has gone up to $17,500 a year. And we originally budgeted on $15,000 last year, but it went up to $17,500. The next row is audit fees, which is $1,900, which is constant through all the years.
And do you have a long-term contract with the auditors?
Yes. But it does go out to bid every once in a while. I mean, we changed auditors a couple years ago.
I'm just surprised that there's not inflation in some of these lines. Wouldn't be a lot, but
Yeah.
it'd be minor growth.
Well, part of the problem, though, is that inflation isn't growing this, so. And then under other, we've had some expenditures, but the major thing, if you notice, that in the budget approved in 2015, in the third column was only $472,000.
$72, not thousand.
$472. And we've upped that to $18,000, and that's primarily for Carlisle Wortman to work on the extension of the Automation Alley Smart Zone and the satellite in Port Huron.
And that's a one-time cost.
Yes, yes, and that's, I have to be honest, I somewhat overestimated on that, just to be careful. Because there's a lot of unknowns, it was kind of, we didn't know exactly how much.
But then going forward, we're at $5,000 a year.
Correct. And so I can go through and say what the total expenditures are, but I don't think that's necessary. Well, I'll do really quick. We're amending the current budget to $255,450. Then the first year of the budget is $163,010. Then $154,790. And the final fiscal year, $153,750. And then we list what our surpluses are, but I think the more important story is what our beginning fund balance is. And starting, last year we budgeted that we'd have a fund balance of $116,495. And we were going to have an ending fund balance of $625. In the next fiscal year, we have a beginning fund balance of, so we're using fund balance.
This year.
Because of the deficit,
Yeah.
the 116. What happens if the fund balance goes negative?
It can't go
Can't.
negative. It
Okay,
is-
so we just stop spending?
Yeah, we have
Well,
no
we-
safety net.
Well,
Because
plus
it's
there was
awfully
fund
close.
balance being accumulated to be able to do the Big Beaver
Mhm.
project. Correct, Mark?
We did.
That was part of it, yes.
Yeah.
Because
So
we're
it was-
pretty close to negative, right, to
Yeah.
break even right now, so we have to really be careful. And
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure where the 50,000 and the expense, what year did we get the double payment?
This current fiscal year we're in.
And that is 2015. Because I see it going out, I don't see it coming in.
Well, okay, I hear you. It must,
So I'm,
we're gonna go ask somebody.
Again?
Yeah, we're gonna go
Okay.
get our financial guy.
okay, good.
Okay, so my answer might be, well, we might need to look at our comprehensive annual financial report, which is.
Well, it's not, the revenue number is low as it is, so it doesn't look like it's in revenue. Unless it's in the 14 number, which was almost 50,000 more than the 13, or the 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
And then, but I think the payment
It
came
could
in this
be
year.
there.
Okay, I guess to be honest, I'm not sure which fiscal year the payment came in.
Okay.
To be 100% honest.
You mean it's a tax tribunal issue?
No, no, it's an accidental double payment of capture from one parcel.
No, don't forget it.
Okay.
So it was recorded twice as revenue, so you have to take it out.
Right.
Right. Well, and I agree, it looks like
I don't
it's,
see it coming in.
I
so
agree,
it's-
it's more likely, it looks like it came from the 2014 year, because you have that higher number, 184,000, as property taxes.
Yeah.
And depending upon when it came in, it could come in within 2 days or
Right.
within 11 and a half months.
And what that would mean is that really 14 was overstated by 50,000.
Mhm.
Sure.
And now we're understating 15 by 50,000, but it gives us a level of comfort that we weren't as bad as we thought. We didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
While we're waiting for that answer, let's say Automation Alley needs capital improvements, and I think you did do some recently. Do we participate in any capital improvements for Automation Alley? Is there a request typically for something like that?
We're granted the ability to make a request. And then it's up to the LDFA to decide what to do with that.
And
Historically, though, there was, I'm gonna go off the cuff, and about $300,000 when you initially opened up, directed towards Automation Alley for the building. Does that sound right, Ken, about that? Over 3 or 4 years.
yeah, and there were some additions or renovations to the property, the offices recently, and in that case, we did not do
I don't
any.
think you made any contribution, that was federal money, I think.
Okay,
I think when we came here, the LDFA gave us originally $240,000 a year. We're not, so things have changed for everybody.
Yeah.
right,
That's what happened when we first came.
okay.
You know, we're just going back and looking at the revenues that have been collected. It does appear that that was,
A spike.
the 2013-14 was a spike.
Yep.
Because you were on a downward trend, significant downward trend, and that was when things started turning up, but that number's a real anomaly.
I thought it looked high too, but I thought maybe other things were dropping in 15, but.
Yeah, it does look funny.
No, because in the previous year, you know, we were, you know, during the 5 years of, we really saw revenues drop precipitously from a high of 292,000 in FY 209 to 210 to 196 in 10 and 11 to 123 in 11 and 12 to 86
Yeah,
in 12 and 13.
so we,
Which could have been a combination of a couple of things. It could have been a combination of just the downward trend in value. It also could have been as a result of some tax tribunal.
Mhm.
And then it jumps to 184 the next year. So that's
that
That's
50's
probably
in there
what it
twice.
occurred.
That coupled with when we did the budget last year, we estimated revenue at 138, which would be the 84 plus
yeah.
55.
Just from a geographic perspective, it probably would have made more sense to reduce the revenue number. Because it was a revenue in, it should have been a revenue out, as opposed to increasing expenses. So if you looked at accumulated statement, you'd have 50,000 too much in revenue and 50,000 too much in expense. If you put them both in revenue, they'd net.
I think that's what you'll find
In the audit report.
in our audit report, which is called a comprehensive annual financial report. Madam Chair, maybe we can
along?
delay this and come back when
Sure.
Mr. Darling comes in, we can.
Sure,
Hello.
yeah, I think everybody's comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
that's what it's there for.
I mean, yeah, I'm just curious what it's.
Sure,
No, what I mean is-
and we have to vote to send this to council, so I'd like everybody to be comfortable before we vote, quite honestly. Extension update, who's presenting?
Well,
Who's talking to us?
I'll be happy to do it. Since you've included money in the budget for me, I think I should earn my keep.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle.
As the board knows, we spoke to you last year about the prospect of extension, and as a matter of fact, I think at the time we last met, we were submitting the extension request, I believe, and did receive, we got in there at the deadline and received approval as one of 3 smart zones in the state to receive a 15-year extension. As you also probably recall, as part of that, we were required to attract a satellite, which we did, which is Port Huron, St. Clair area. And we were successful in doing that. We did, after the first of the year, we did get a bit of a setback and a bit of delay because Port Huron, in terms of putting together some of their financial projections, began to become very concerned about the impact on personal property, because they have a lot more industrial property than, most of their LDFA is consisting of industrial property. Consequently, Southfield and Troy asked me to work with them, and eventually we got Rosalind Zator from MEDC involved, and we were able to develop an approach with Port Huron that they were actually going to get a great benefit by not including personal property, first of all, and second of all, they had not completely included the requirement that they need to actually expand the district to incorporate, a new area of smart zone. So as a result of that, the kind of revenues that they thought were going to be a negative after the third year when the personal property tax situation really kicked in, actually turned out to be, to receive probably close to twice the revenues that they thought they were going to have. So as a result, that issue got straightened out and we were able to move forward. They, as a matter of fact, are scheduled tonight before City Council to adopt their plan. We have a couple more things that we need to do here to complete the draft plan with both Troy and Southfield, but I'm hoping that within approximately a month or so, we will have a complete draft plan ready for the joint LDFA to review. And that's really where we're sitting now. We theoretically had a June 30th deadline to submit these plans to the state. That deadline has been relaxed by the state, partly because there has been an issue with the change in who holds the state treasurer's position. As the state was dealing with their own budget issues, the previous treasurer was not dealing with this particular issue, which is a very focused, targeted issue. It's not part of the bigger issue of all the tax credits that the state has been reviewing. It's really a relatively minor issue, but the entire issue was languishing as a result. However, I think the new treasurer's only been in office now a week, and in fact, I just happened to see our rep this morning from MEDC, and she had indicated to me that right now, nobody's plans are getting reviewed. So she says, get your plan in, but don't worry about the deadlines that much now, because there are a bunch of plans that are sitting there that haven't been reviewed by the state treasurer yet. So we're in very good shape when it comes to deadlines. We're in good shape with our relationship with the satellite. We're in good shape with our relationship with Southfield. Mark and Shelley Freeman, who's their business rep, have been meeting regularly, and there's a lot of new stuff that's kind of gelling out of all this. So I think we're going to have some real positive things to report with the new plan.
Do we have something in writing extending the deadline, or?
No, that's a good point. We do not. It will not be a problem getting it, but.
No, we did
Yeah, we
receive,
did.
we received something.
You did?
Yeah,
Okay.
from Rosalind.
Just feel more comfortable if you have something in,
If you
yeah.
asked, I was going to.
Yeah,
I can-
because, they can say you're okay for as
Well, and I
long as
totally.
they say it, and then
It's
you're
a-
not.
Then they're not saying
Yeah,
it.
right.
And if
It's a
Ken
very
was
good
sitting
point,
here,
because the rules of extension changed about 5 times,
Yeah.
when we were putting all this together last year, so, so that's,
So we
That's
have
pretty
something in writing, is it indefinite, or is it timed?
No, it's not, there is no time, it's indefinite at this point.
There is somewhat of a critical deadline internally, though, in the fact that we don't want to skip amendment of the plan, because particularly, it's not so much Troy, but in Southfield, there is additional capture that they're going to be able to gain by this amendment to the plan. So it's more, your situation is a little bit different. Southfield's is considerably different, so there's a motivation to get the plan done, this year for sure.
I liked soon better. I like soon better. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, concerns for Mr. Carlisle on the expansion? Good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Darling, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vitale had some questions about the 50,000 tax refund. We don't see it coming in, we just see it going out.
You just see it going out? Sure. Well, let me help you with that. You actually see it coming in where it's in the 2014 property tax revenues. You see how that says 184,000? Well, in our surprise, the assessor does the assessments, right, on the taxable value, and they go to the county assessor and the county treasurer where they get certified. Well, somewhere in their infinite wisdom, they decided that it should have gone up basically about $1 million in what the taxable value was created about a $50,000 additional capture. Obviously, I review the stuff, but when I'm reviewing, I can come back and say, okay, great. We looked at it, the county signed off on it, this must be the dollars, and that's where I'm tying out the 184,000 for 14, and obviously the auditors review that. Part of the budget process this time is, Nino was telling me, hey, your capture's going to be about 138,000 for 15. And said, well, how can I go from 180 to 138? What's going on? Because I know they had some new building right in the district, and that's really what we thought in 14. Oh, they're capturing that value. Well, it doesn't really get captured really till 16 if you look at your budget. At the end of the day, that's where the 50,000 is going. Is what I'm anticipating what the refund, or i.e. tax tribunals, tax refunds will be back to the local jurisdiction, where in our opinion they overcaptured.
So what was the property tax in 13?
I came unprepared to answer that question,
but
I believe it's probably about 135,000
Okay, so it
somewhere
was like
in there.
50 less.
Right, exactly.
So it went up 50. I imagine your budget was more in the 135
That's correct.
range.
That's correct.
So the 50 popped when you
It
compared.
popped when we're looking at what's going on. The
But there was
explanation
a
is we thought
decent explanation for
that I thought, right, the addition of that new property, but it didn't hit that tax roll. It doesn't hit the tax rolls, so you can see here in 2016.
So it became clear the following
Right.
year that there was an error in their calculation.
Exactly.
To the tune of about 50 grand. Why wouldn't we treat that 50 grand as a reduction then to the property tax? Or
Because
maybe on a
it's-
separate line, but within revenue, because that's where the error was?
The correct treatment would be as an expenditure. You would not offset an expenditure, i.e. a refund, if it's outside that fiscal year, to basically skew your revenue line items.
Well, you're
It's an
skewing the expense.
No, it's a separate line, it says
Yeah.
tax tribunals, and that's the
Okay,
accounting
alright.
for a refund that's outside, outside the year of what you captured. If we were still in 14 and we realized that, then obviously I would net it against the revenue, but now you're outside that.
And that's
that
GAAP.
fiscal year,
And
right, so
maybe
that becomes
governmental
a-
accounting
Yeah,
is
right.
different.
That is
Okay.
definitely gap.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
definitely gap, I
Okay.
Yeah.
will promise you
It
that.
is.
All right. Good.
That experience.
So you're good. You now know that 14 was a spike in that amount.
Yeah.
You would like to see 13 to prove it to yourself. We can do that afterwards.
Actually,
That's
that's
Absolutely.
okay, but Madam Chair, I would suggest footnoting that 14 was overstated by that $50,000 and 15 is understated by the $50,000.
That's, it's
15
certainly,
is
Make it
it's
clear to the reader that, because otherwise it
certainly
looks
a
like there's these
clarification
big
that
swings.
the staff can make, that this $50,000 tax refund is from
The prior year.
revenue
Yeah.
inadvertently given us
Right.
in 14.
And maybe asterisk property taxes in 14 and then that expense in 15, so it's clear where it's in and out.
Should, Would it help if on the line where it says tax tribunals and tax refunds, to parenthesize 2014?
No, I think Nick is right. If you will just asterisk it and say
Yep,
refunding of an overpayment from 2014.
Yeah.
I think that makes the,
very good.
Mr. Mayor?
Question for Tom.
Yes, sir.
What will the audit say for this year? Will there be an explanation from the audit?
A footnote?
A footnote from the audit when it's
No.
done?
Absolutely not. I mean, we're accounting for it correctly.
Okay, so they just,
It was
check it out.
certified right after the trust from them. We are accounting for it correctly in this year. And so it's not an audit, it's not a violation. It's certainly a correction of an error or an estimate from
A
prior
lot of times
years.
they will make footnotes in their audit.
Or even restate the prior year if they
Yeah.
deem it material.
But again, I don't think this is necessarily would meet the definitions of a restatement as opposed to an estimate. And there's a difference between an actual restatement and an estimate.
And do we actually get an audit, or do they do a
Absolutely
review?
get
They
an
don't
audit,
do a
yeah.
review?
Absolutely, you get a separate audit for the LDFA.
Okay.
Yeah, it's included in the city's total comprehensive annual financial report, but it
Right.
has its own sections, both at a full accrual and a modified accrual basis of
Okay.
accounting for you. So, yeah, that'll be in there. I can certainly talk to the auditors, and we create the financial statements, they audit them.
Right.
If we think that, that it, and keep in mind, you're looking at a specific fiscal year, right? You don't have comparative years in these financials.
They
All
don't put
you'll-
2 years?
No, it'll only
Okay.
be 15.
All right.
Because it's complicated as enough with modified accrual, full
Yeah.
accrual, if you've ever looked, and I'll be happy to go over those with you.
Thanks.
Let alone have comparative years in there makes
He
it
does
just a
hospital
little bit
accounting,
more.
that's enough.
A little more, well, then you certainly know where I'm going from a fund statement.
Do you do a
Paul's got a
a monthly statement, a quarterly statement, or just?
We do quarterly statements clearly for the city as a whole. For the LDFA, we do not. That doesn't mean that we can't. We do annuals because of the activities not.
The question came up as to.
Because I really wouldn't, I'm sorry, just to say, because typically your big things are, the marketing costs and the audit fee, I mean, that's in 1 month, it isn't like.
Yeah, you really couldn't spread it very
No.
easily
No.
throughout the year.
Right.
Well, the
it
question
wouldn't-
came up about our fund balance.
Yes.
Being fairly low, and what would be the first thing what expenditure would be the first one to be cut back, and when would you know to cut back?
Yeah,
Well, that is certainly a direction that the board gives. I can't answer that, but you're right, if we're looking at it as 15, it looks like we're getting pretty low. Again, we start building it back up in 16 through 18, right?
but if we hit a hiccup, or if the timing is such that expenses get paid early in 16 and revenues come in later, that could go to a deficit, because we're sitting at $625.
That's where.
It
monthly and
is,
quarterly-
it is awful close for me.
That's where you get into, maybe you do want to spread the budget and see, how it plays out from a cash perspective.
Well, quite honestly, I mean, if it came to that, because again, it's a modified accrual basis of accounting, what would I do from a practical standpoint? I would probably reduce the administrative fees, even though that may not be what the mayor wants, temporary, so say
Sure.
I'm down 1,000, so we may charge 4,000 this year and go to 6,000 in 16 to make up for that little hiccup. If you're asking me from a practical standpoint, that would be my suggestion to your director and chairman and going that way.
And you're right, there are expenses like that over which we have some flexibility.
Yes, correct.
And so those would be probably where.
When do we get the tax assessments? What
The
month
budget
of
is
the year?
based on the roll as it comes in after the March hearings, right? And then July, so.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, and it goes out to the county, and the county certifies and goes through that. So the first levy is July 1st.
So
For the next
cash
fiscal-
comes in the door on July 1 for that.
The
Well,
cash
yeah.
comes in
Cash is
when-
billed and it comes in
when people pay
September.
their bills.
Yeah. The bills go out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bills go
But
up.
we're paying bills
We
that
are.
whole time, so
So 625 is probably not going to cut it
that's
For
what
the
I'm
first
thinking.
quarter
Right.
of that year. But there are not a lot of things that have to be paid during that first quarter as well.
As long as somebody's looking, because you don't want to get in a situation where,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Yes,
You know, it's, you know, government budgeting, as you indicated, is very different. This is really no different than what happens to the city of Troy. We collect taxes different times of the year. It's more what happens at the end, not so much what happens during the year.
As long as there's enough in the bank to pay the bills.
There will
you're
be,
right.
there
Yes.
will be enough in the bank so that there isn't a deficit.
So we can do deficit spending as long as by the end of the year we're okay.
We
I wouldn't
prefer
say
not
it's
to call it
deficit
deficit
spending.
spending.
I don't know.
We do not do deficit
That's not
spending.
the
We don't
wording-
do that.
That's not the
No.
wording you can use. but,
Okay,
um,
sorry.
Concept is there.
We have bills upon which we can be flexible in how we pay them that
Right.
first.
From a cash flow, and I think that's where you're going, from a cash
That's
flow
exactly where I'm
perspective,
going, yeah.
right.
Right.
We will
Yeah,
not, we will not
administrative
overdraw the
fees
bank.
within different departments, I get you.
Exactly,
You know.
and the 60,000 that would go to Automation Alley doesn't get deducted completely from the
Right.
fund on
Right.
August 1st,
No.
you know.
I
so-
suspect
in fact-
that goes,
No,
that
in
gets
In
fact,
fact,
paid.
we haven't paid them yet for this fiscal year,
Right.
because we just found out exactly how much taxes we received, and we
Exactly.
traditionally cut the check to Automation Alley in May,
Yeah, so.
because that's when we find how much money we actually captured. in
So you
both.
are managing.
And-
You're
Yeah.
managing it as we go through it,
Yeah.
so that at the end of the year, we will make sure that we are not in a deficit. We will not be in a deficit.
I didn't mean to imply you would be.
No, I
No.
Oh,
We legally-
I'm glad you got that
Yeah.
considered
Yeah.
yourself.
You know, legally, we can't.
Right.
We can't.
Mark, isn't it true though, too, also, even though we have money set aside in the infrastructure budget, this is largely in anticipation of future needs, is that not correct? I mean,
Not totally, because we spent money in this fiscal year for Big Beaver, but we're budgeting some funds in the future.
yeah, no, I know that, I mean, going forward, I understand that the money this year, but I'm talking about where we were talking about the problem is in the 2016 budget, I believe.
Correct, if under expenditures, the second row, infrastructure, in 2016, in 2017, and 2018, we do not have exact projects
Yeah,
yet.
that's not committed
Yeah.
yet, so there's some
Yeah,
flexibility.
well, and we're showing a surplus at the end of 16 of 19,000, so the end of the year looks like it'll be fine.
Yeah,
It's just early on.
Yeah, it's a little-
Because we're starting at 625.
it's a little too.
The one thing I'd like to really comment about this process is that, you know, Glenn and I work with Tom and Nino, because Nino is, right, this budget forces us to settle out exactly how much capture we have, and it's a mad rush we do every year, force ourselves to get it all done.
Yeah.
And that's really, what my point was, is that we find out exactly how much money we have, because then, when we find out exactly how much money we have, we then build our projections out from there, and we do that every year.
Okay.
I just kind of want to explain to you that process, because when we do definitively know our exact capture, then we can build the next year's budget from that.
Have we ever discussed setting a minimum fund balance, 25% of an annual budget or something, just kind of as a safety net?
We have not with this group because our expenses are really quite limited.
Yeah.
And we have a commitment to Automation Alley, we have a commitment to our staff to pay for them, and that pretty well covers what we have. And the flexible item is always the infrastructure. So it's not something that I would preclude talking about, absolutely, and I'm kind of with you. To leave less than 10% in there makes me really nervous.
Right.
And, yeah, given what I have in my household budget, I'd like more.
But if we always had 20 to 25,
We'd be smooth.
yeah.
Yeah, Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's really never been an issue before because you've been well above that. It's just this one hiccup for 15, it looks like, and even going, if you look out to 16
What
to
was the
18,
perfect
we
storm?
build it back up, right?
had a bad
By
year.
18, right.
We had a bad year and we had a correction from the prior year all hit in 1 year, so that drove a $115,000 deficit in the year.
And you're right, and while we'd like to think that that would never happen again, that's not good management. To think that it'll never happen again and we don't need to think about it. But, Mr. Carlisle, you had a thought?
Well, I was just gonna say that it is a good thought because in the immediate future, there are not readily pressing infrastructure needs. As you think about the 15-year lifespan of the extension here, you know, there's going to be infrastructure issues within the smart zone itself, within the park, that are going to need to be addressed. I mean, the road isn't gonna last forever. You know, there's gonna be other issues that we're gonna have to deal
Well,
with.
that's a different issue though. That's, do we want to fund a depreciation account where when the infrastructure starts going, there's money being set aside to handle a big expense in any given year, because you know it's gonna happen eventually.
That's right.
And right now, we couldn't fit it in.
Yeah.
I mean, the infrastructure dollars are pretty small right now.
And just so that the board knows, I mean, we've included a language in the plan, you know, to give the board the flexibility to be able to make those decisions in the future about what your most critical infrastructure needs are. There's enough language in the plan that you would be authorized, you know, to devote some funding towards those six, so.
Let's channel this, and then I want to continue this discussion for just a minute. But let's do what we need to do about this budget right here and now, so Mr. Darling can get back to work. And then you have a session to run in an hour and a half, so give you time for.
I assume we're only recommending the 16 budget for approval. The other 2 years are, because they'll change when you get to those years.
They'll change, but we do recommend all 3 years because the city of Troy adopts a 3-year budget so that
So
they
they have to bake this in.
have a structure within which to work.
Gotcha.
We call
So-
it an evolving budget. So
Yeah.
we've kind of mirrored our, you know, Oakland County is
I know
the
Brooks
model.
does that too, yeah.
And
Started it.
so we modeled our budgeting process after the county, so I like to call it an evolving because it changes. It can change from year to year, but it's so good to look at a 3-year outlook
Right.
rather than kick the can like the state of Michigan does every year. You know, all they do is kick the can down the road. We don't kick the can down the road, so that's why we do it. And
One
we
last
do a
question.
5-year outlook. We do a 5-year outlook.
Sure.
With regard to revenue, because the assessors or whomever it was that made this mistake are human, they could make it again. Are there any tests we can do to validate their numbers, just to get a level of comfort?
Well, again, typically when it goes back, our assessor will send it out. In this particular case, the certified went directly to the treasurer without going through him, so we're trying to get him more in the loop. What's coming back?
Okay.
Is it what you sent in? Is there a large variance? Please let me know.
Yeah.
And so we can address it. But when it came back in, the explanation that was given to him was this new property. Well, it clearly wasn't, and it's clearly a timing thing from the new development that was in that area. So, and that really came apparent. And just really one quick thing on the fund balance. If you look at 2015, keep in mind you're not passing budgets that are below, having sufficient
Right.
funds. So from a planning standpoint, it's just, again, it's the estimate for 2015 of what we're actually doing. But from this board's perspective and budget setting policy, it seems to be very solid.
It's just close.
Yeah, the budget was to have 30% fund balance.
Right. Well, you put the 50 back in and you're
Yeah.
fine,
Mhm. So we're,
but
yeah,
it's not there, so.
no, it's not, so,
And we don't know,
Timing.
again, it's an estimate for 50. It may
Yeah.
come in 35,
and I
Yeah.
doubt it, but I think we need to be realistic. But again, I don't think that our 16, 17, 18 budgets, from all of the discussion that I've heard today, I don't know that anyone has a problem with those.
Mhm.
And so I believe that we should recommend to council that this be our budget as submitted and hope that they would pass it. So I
Do you
need a motion.
Well, could I just kind of move the motion as printed with the
With the
asterisk that-
annotations?
that was indicated earlier.
I think that's great.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
can I kind of state what I think that note should say? So
Sure.
that you understand? Note, 2014 overpayment of tax revenues. 2016 budget year, a $50,000 repayment to Oakland County Treasurer.
No, 15.
15.
It's in 15.
Oh,
It's in 15.
Actually-
yeah, it is, we're
Yeah,
doing it this
yeah.
year, I apologize.
If I
Yeah,
could
Don't
add,
make
we're-
it worse.
if I could add
I
a friendly
apologize.
amendment to that,
Sure,
what I would do is asterisk somehow the 184,
yes.
That's
and I
what
would
I had.
asterisk the 50, and then the asterisk footnote would read, due to an assessment error
Overpayment.
or change in estimate, overpayment of roughly or approximately $50,000, 2014 revenues or property taxes were overstated by 50, therefore the expenses in 15 were adjusted accordingly, or something like that. So it's clear to them, it's an in and an out in the 2 years.
I think that's great.
That sounds great.
And, yes, Tom?
Yeah, can I change the word payment to capture?
That's fine.
Yes, that's fine. But that way, it
Yeah, I'm just trying to,
summarizes
they know it's
and-
in here, out here,
With
it
asterisks.
washes.
Yes.
That makes
Very
sense.
good.
I think that's great.
Absolutely.
And that way, because it's part of the motion, it will go in the document. So we have a move to submit this budget as a recommendation with the annotations about the $50,000 in extra revenue and in tax refund.
Did somebody make a motion?
I did.
The mayor made the motion, but I need a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Nick. All those in favor of those annotations and this 3-year budget with the past history, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, motion carries. What I wanted to continue, and I think it's important for this board, if we will have a discussion on a fund balance, thanks, Dick. You can.
Thanks, everybody.
If you want to, thank you,
Nice to see you.
appreciate it.
Before you leave though,
Yeah.
because you deal with a lot of these types of organizations, is there a standard for fund balances or best practice that you see?
No, and part of the reason is because most of these kind of organizations that I'm dealing with are accumulating dollars predominantly for infrastructure. So their budgets are really geared to accumulate sufficient fund balance to be able to pay for an improvement that's going to come in down the road.
Okay, so they're building it up just by virtue of the fact that they need it all and.
Correct. And in essence, that's kind of what you're doing.
It's the same thing, right?
It's the same thing, except you have an ongoing, regular expense to support Automation Alley. And essentially, your fund balance to some degree is, I know Tom would probably kill me for saying this, but your fund balance in some degree is actually what you're budgeting for infrastructure. And you're making the decisions down the road when staff comes to you and says, we need to, contribute towards the cost of paving, you'll have the money, budgeted.
And that is in fact what happened. We hadn't put any money into roads or anything else in all the time since, the 10+ years. And then they came to us this year and said, it's really in front of your park.
Yeah.
You need help. And that's why we did it. But what I started to say was,
So is that?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
For-
Good to hear.
particularly for those of us who sit on this board and have not been here from the beginning, can you guys please put together a timeline of revenues and expenditures from the beginning so that people can
By year.
see the buildup
That's not good.
and the spending, and then if we want to still have a discussion, we each are all operating from an informed perspective.
Yeah.
So if you would do that, I would appreciate it.
And maybe do a search to see if other organizations, if there's a best practice out there regarding reserve fund or.
There are a lot of tips around, but my experience is
The
like
same,
Dick's,
yeah.
that they're looking
Maybe
to
we're
do
just so unique.
something.
Yeah.
In DDAs, it's,
Yeah.
streetscapes and encouragement, incentives, those kinds of things. In our case, it's infrastructure, but
Okay.
they can check on that as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On that research, I I know I can easily do a timeline of revenues. Now, do you want, when you say expenditures, do you want them total or?
No, just, yeah, you can have total, but it would be helpful to know our major budget items. So I think you could probably take,
Well, I've done Automation Alley before, I
Yeah.
have that.
and we added the marketing piece, 10
Okay.
years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. Look on the back of the
Okay,
brochure,
I've got it.
I'll tell you, but those major things, and the staff cost has been fairly stable throughout. But just major lines, I don't care that it was $3.77 that got paid
Well, you
for
have another
stamps.
line
Yeah.
in years when you don't have the detail, just put it there.
So, yeah, but I think just major, how Automation Alley's support has dwindled and what we've saved and then how we've spent it. I think that would give you some background that would be helpful.
Because we just got a 15-year extension, right?
Yeah.
So
Not
we
yet.
can-
Well,
not
that's
yet.
what we're working on.
Okay, but once we get it, then we'll have rules of engagement
Sure.
going forward that ensure we'll be healthy. going
And I
forward.
think that to ensure that, we need to have a discussion.
Right.
But you can't do that unless you're
Yeah.
informed. So, that's why I would ask for that. Any other board member comment? You were not very chatty today.
I think I more than made up for that. Great summary.
Very good point,
Yeah.
so.
We can't talk next time.
Any news from the county you want to share?
Oh, we are getting ready for our Economic Outlook Luncheon on Thursday. It's a sold-out event again, where we have an internal goal of always trying to outperform what the economists say. So I think we'll be successful again this year, and we're looking forward to the press conference.
Terrific. Thank you. Seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.